welcome back to part 2 of our Communication and Cultural Change Asynchronous Dialogue video lecture, week 3. We are taking questions from Aaron at present, and we spent a full mini session just debriefing and unpacking the first pair of questions there. So maybe this academic thing is becoming a problem for me, a personal problem. Let's shift to some questions Aaron has about Mattel's television and American culture, looking at chapter 10 this week. And it's a question that deals with children's television programming. Children's television programming and animation in general, two themes we're exploring in week 3 of this course. And Aaron asks, will you talk a little bit about the section discussing marketing to children, starting or roughly around, page 388. I'm a bit confused about the point Mattel is making. It seems like he's saying commercial attempts to market to children aren't as successful as we might believe because children won't necessarily use the merchandise merchandise as it was intended. But does the marketer care how their product is being used as long as the product is selling? Or am I missing the point entirely here, right? Nice little smile emoji. This is a fair counterpoint. Ultimately, yes, it is all about the green, all about the movement. Okay, can we move a product? And are we able to gain and sustain profitability? First and foremost, you're right. Dollars and cents are that cold hard line that determine whether something continues long past its creative expiration date. And something else to think about, though, is marketers there are savvier ways to track this type of data now, but marketers don't just want to appeal to a niche demographic. They want to appeal to the broadest audience possible, but ideally certain shows, certain programs, and thus the tie-in products that they're selling are meant to reach a particular consumer demographic. Okay, so here's a great example, and since we were talking about animation throughout the decades, and then one of our themes is talking about the 80s, reading about the 80s, screening the 80s docuseries on the episode 1 on television. And one of the prime texts that shifted consumer culture for children in conjunction with animation was Masters of the Universe in the early 1980s. And Filmation, the company that produced it, this was an instance where not so much an instance, it's what we call a paradigm shift. Okay, a large pivot took place where a show was produced to sell the pre-existing toy lines and thus to lead to the creation of more toy lines, rather than a cartoon or program existed and its popularity created the demand for product. Okay, and so oftentimes you may have an idea that's conceptualized and then it becomes something like maybe a comic or comic book or television series or movie, and then based on the strength of those ideas in that medium, film, television, literature, they may produce these tie-in products. But here's an instance where there was an approach that went the other way around, and it started a trend that continues. However, let's fast forward. While there were many successful examples that followed Masters of the Universe, Transformers, G.I. Joe, among many others, you think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, although it started as a comic strip. Really, the booming popularity of the cartoon helped drive those toy sales, right? And the desire for capital gain there. But one of the issues is, while some of those other products that I just mentioned, Transformers especially, but also the Ninja Turtles line, these have been able to sustain new viewers, new interests, new consumers over time, whereas Masters of the Universe, after a couple of quickly failed attempts, have dwindled down to a very niche market. Okay, and so what we mean by that is a small demographic of highly devoted fans sort of keep that text alive, keep that text in circulation. And so there's a fascinating history there, and it brings to mind, if you, so many of you have Netflix, but the new quasi-doc, I'm going to call it a docutainment series, because it's as much about entertaining as giving some trivial history to products and ideas. But there is a series that premiered in December 2017 called the Toys That Made Us. It's a very brief 4-episode series, but one of the episodes centers on the Masters of the Universe toy line and its history, and it's just a spectacular case study to look at, because they were so popular, so highly profitable, and then just fell off a cliff, and have had a weird several decades of attempting to recover. And there is that small devoted market again for MOTU love, right? And they keep trying to find ways to rekindle the flame, but it's going to take the strategic investment and development of a younger audience. But perhaps they finally figured something out, because recently it was announced that Netflix, of course, is investing in a She-Ra cartoon series in the near future. And of course, to connect those dots, She-Ra is the spin-off of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and incidentally his twin sister that happens to exist in an alternate dimension. All right, the more you know. Did I even answer that question? I think we just went nuts there. Oh yes, I think we did. So there are different strategies to the marketing, and it's important to remember, in the instance of the He-Man example, it took way too long to set that up. Marketers, it's not just about the money, because it also depends on, well, who does the money represent. But also there was some mixed wording in there from Mattel, and this is gonna, I think someone asks a similar question a little later on, but in terms of products, children getting products and having different uses for them being the issue, Mattel is suggesting children don't use, the things they purchase or buy or own or possess the same way they were intended by the marketers. Well, what is intent, right? Some of them do, some of them don't. And so I think there's room for what Aaron is saying as well. Thus, we're seeing the importance of, this type of reasoning. But also, sometimes you see the reverse. So think about when Star Wars The Force Awakens came out. There was an instant backlash. These toy lines, they have to also straddle this line between how much from the movies are they allowed to spoil in advance or share, what have you. But long story short, they definitely undersold the value of Rey, right? The character of Rey in the new Star Wars movies, and specifically from The Force Awakens. And they were releasing product after product after product, and no Rey. The initial line of Lego Star Wars, which is Lego's #1 line, the Rey wasn't released, and this led to some PR backlash. Okay, so then the kind of politically correct critics went after them on the internet, and there was a little bit of backtracking, but really they didn't do a great job of covering up the reason why they didn't. And so we can kind of collectively link arms and say, yeah, and shame on you, and shame on Disney, and they should have known better, and shame on Hasbro. Is Hasbro still? Oh, I'm gonna have to double check my history. I might be mixing histories, but um, the point being, they need that. Why was Ray not given equal footing, on a marketing level, on a toy level, to be specific, a toy level? Well, let's pause and think about it, not in terms of a what's right level, but once again, if it's about money, then what do you do when you're caught in that kind of double bind? People in my family, okay, young ones in my home, collect one of the more recent incarnations of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And myself, it's not already apparent, right? I'm of the mind of, well, we need one of everything, right? We must possess each character. They matter, and the more obscure, the better. So, of course, in those initial lines, we pick up an April O'Neil, okay, to go with the Turtles line. And while, it's all good as part of the collection process, I can testify that I am the only one to try to bring April into a play situation at the house, to bring April into the narrative play fold. April's always put off to the side intentionally, and I try to, without coercing, try to have these conversations where, let's bring this in, or April's great, right? I try to, we call it, pump up the character, empower her through my words, through my persuasive ability, my social persuasion, to no avail. No avail. April's gets no play at the house, and for that matter, the eldest collector, not me in the house, also would cast aside Master Splinter. So naturally, as a parental figure, I'm going to take offense to that, because now I'm starting to associate with that role. But so Master Splinter. So not only is April cast aside, but the old characters cast aside as well. Master Splinter's not getting any love in tandem, although a different, more objective player in the house has been more inclusive of Master Splinter over time. So, but that's tricky. So sales figures will reflect that Rey would have been a lesser consumed product from Star Wars, because fewer people are buying, because the majority audience of Star Wars collectibles consumers are males. What do you do there, right? Will this change over time? I suspect. Right, they're investing heavily in a more diversified world. Even the last movie, emblematic that they're trying to create an inclusive ensemble, and that's a healthy direction. But you're always going to have resistance, and we can also recognize that a certain pocket of hardcore, fan dash collectors are typically behind, these, this sort of online outcry, bunch of nonsense, right? Hype about nothing. Okay. Let's see here. The original purpose of Sesame Street was to reach disadvantaged preschoolers, page 396. Do you think that has changed now that the show airs on HBO, a channel to which the families of disadvantaged preschoolers may not have access? I would say this really quickly. I would say it's more about preserving and protecting the brand of Sesame Street now, okay? And there is a, I don't have enough time to preface. There is I'm going to label it this, a neoliberal belief in the arts as well as public education. And I think that Sesame Street adds value to HBO, less so than HBO shielded Sesame Street from ending entirely. So this speaks to, once again, a hidden class warfare.